What is up, everybody? This is the Wild Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Heskett, and this is episode 120, which I think on the last episode I accidentally said, but this is actually episode 120. I think the last one was 119. Anyways, today's guest is a new one. So we have a gardener coming on to talk to you guys about food production, how to grow the best, most nutritious food, or even just flowers in your garden. As you know, one of my hobbies is gardening. It is part of being outdoorsy, in my opinion. So we're going to talk today with Ryan Capinski of the Biosoil Company about his product, which can improve the health of your soil, improve overall production, and everything you want out of your garden. His product is really amazing. We were connected through a mutual friend, Nick Averona, which he'll be back on the podcast. And we are doing the project, the Not Perfect Kitchen, together. So Ryan's a friend of Nick and now friend of mine. So his company has spent the past 5+ years studying soil and studying ways that plants grow to maximize the genetic potential of the plants. So what this means for you as a gardener, if you're a beginner gardener, his product's a one-stop shop. Has everything you need into one product, so you can just fill a pot or put it in the ground, put it in raised beds, and be done. You don't have to think about anything else. For someone who is more advanced, it means in a smaller space, you can grow more plants and get the same or better production. You can grow in the same amount of space. You can put even more plants in. Did I just say that? You could use less space and shove more plants into it. So like the same amount of plants you're currently planting, you could go into a smaller space and get same or better production. You can use the same amount of space, put more plants in, or you can increase your space, increase the number of plants. There's so much, it's so versatile, the product. So no matter what you want to do, if you want to reduce the size so there's less upkeep, less weeding by shoving more plants into a small area, you can do that. If you want to grow less plants with more production, so to save on time, you can do that with his product. If you want to grow more plants, because what he's about to tell you about his peppers, his pumpkins, and tomatoes is ridiculous, you can do that to maximize food production in the space you already have. So if you're like, I wish I could take things to the next level, I don't have the space, or I don't have the time to build out more space, his product might be that missing thing that you're looking for. So we talk about what makes his product different than the soils you're going to grab at your local hardware store, how to maximize the genetic potential of plants, and nerd out about some of the gardening stuff, but keep it fairly, like, if you're new, you're not going to get lost, as I will ask questions. So if Ryan starts going on in a rant, I will ask questions to kind of bring things back. And as always, make sure to go down and give him a follow. If you have any questions, his link to his website and his social media are going to be down below. So reach out to him, email him, or send him a message on Instagram if you have any questions about anything. And before we get into things, I'm going to say this at the end as well. While you have a moment, let me know if you want to see more episodes like this by leaving a review. Especially on Spotify, you can leave individual show reviews, which I do read, or also go in and make sure you rate the show if you haven't already. So on Apple and Spotify, make sure to drop a rating, as that helps the show get pushed out so more people can find it. Without further ado, here's Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
How we doing, Chris?
I'm good. All right. As I said, kind of off camera here, this has been a long time in making. I've been following you for a while, and it's a little bit of a different episode because you are not a nutrition or fitness coach. You run, for lack of a better term, a kind of like a soil company, which I want to talk about since one of my hobbies is gardening, and I'm gearing up for getting the seeds in the ground for spring. So tell me a little bit about your company and what inspired you to start your own soil company, because there's 1,000 different soil companies out there if you just look at like Lowe's or Home Depot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So my name is Ryan Capinski, and I own a company called the Biosoil Company. We started about 2 years ago, And it was I was at a place in my career and trying to find something that I was passionate about. That's really where it started. And prior to that 2 years, I had spent about 6 years absolutely obsessed with gardening. And I ended up really kind of going down the track of the online education, the YouTube
Mhm.
education. And I'm a huge believer of that. I think that there's a lot of resources out there, and my angle was to look at as many different ways in which in which gardening was occurring, and from big agriculture all the way down to the backyard gardener. And I specifically was doing backyard gardening. So I was trying to figure out at the core of it, I was trying to figure out how to organically grow the highest quality food, and why success was in some, down some avenues and not down some other avenues, and why some people were doing it one way and why other people were doing it another way. So over about 5 years, I estimate I spent over 11 or 12,000 hours
Oh, wow.
just consuming. I mean, I was absolutely obsessed with this, and there's a couple dozen creators that I actually have on my website as a resource.
Nice.
Some of the ones that have been the most influential to me, to this education, and I like to think of it as that I took all of the best parts of what I found through those resources. I consolidated them. I used them year over year. I started narrowing down what I thought were best practices. And after about year three, I started seeing these results that were a product of all that information.
Okay.
And I think that after year four, I was starting to convince the people around me, like they were like, okay, you've been obsessed with this for a long time. Okay, wow, that's pretty incredible. I didn't know that that was possible. And then I started seeing a lot of results that were also atypical of what I was even seeing online,
Mhm.
with just the results in the sense of productivity, um, quality, maybe disease resistance or health,
Nice.
um, production, so like specifically the amount of um, food that we might get off of a particular plant
Nice.
was really surprising to me, because I hadn't maybe seen these, or maybe it wasn't documented that people were getting these types of results, and I was getting these types of results, and I was saying, wow, this is really incredible. So after about year 4 or 5, I started really kind of analyzing what I wanted to do as a career, and said that I think I can create a business model. I think that this information needs to be shared. So the Biosoil Company was a product of this passion that I kind of developed over years of trying to grow organic
Mhm.
food in my backyard. And then I created some type of business model to try to monetize it.
Mhm.
But most importantly, I believe my mission is really to educate people about this system, and then provide products and resources that are supported by the Biosoil Company. So people that have access to those can use those, but it's really about the education, the information, and the inspiration of inspiring people to do this on their own, because there are so many holes that growing your own food fits for people's lives, and being applicable to people's lives. So it's I think a really important mission. I think it's really important to have good purpose, and those click all the boxes for me. So that's kind of where it all started, where it all began.
Awesome. So would you say your product's more about like overall soil health and improving the health of the soil versus say like a fertilizer?
Yeah, I would say it's both.
Okay.
What I had learned through all of this research is that kind of the common denominator is it all comes down to soil health.
Mhm.
So the products that we're producing are the combination of both.
Okay.
It's not just organic matter. It's not just this mineral based soil product. it also has this vast array of micronutrients and minerals and larger macronutrients, but it's all in this one simple package that the consumer can easily have a one-stop shop product.
Nice.
So to increase and optimize soil health, which is really the end goal, you can really take our product, and I've tried to create it and compress it into the easiest system possible for people that haven't spent 10,000 hours learning about something like this, and they're just starting, or maybe they have a lot of experience, but either way, they can benefit from these products because these products have kind of incorporated both the organic matter that's really, really important to kind of keep this, to feed the system and to keep the system, the biology constantly fed, as well as all those nutrients that may or may not be present in an existing soil system.
Awesome. I love that because having a one-stop shop, especially for someone like myself, where like I love to nerd out with it, I just don't have the time, like the actual time to commit to producing something like your product, where instead like it's I know all the stuff. I've been nerding out for the past couple of years on gardening stuff. I just personally with all the things I do, I don't have the time to sit down and like combine all the individual ingredients. It's kind of like for me just like throwing stuff together and hoping it works. Like, okay, well, tomatoes need X, so we're just going to throw this in there, and well, it did well, so great. We're just going to do that next year. I don't have time to like actually sit down and like try to optimize things. It's like, did it work? Did it not? Which is fine, but if you know your stuff sounds like it's taking it to the next level, which I like because I've gotten really into soil health, both with backyard gardening, but also I do some small food plots for wildlife, for hunting. So it's also like I'm trying to improve the quality of the soil because I just removed a ton of invasives from the food plot area. And then the soil is absolute garbage. So we're trying to like improve the quality of the soil there after testing the past couple of years. So I like that. So for someone who's kind of like just starting, or someone like myself who's kind of just like gone to Lowe's or Home Depot or something, gotten a bag of soil and maybe some fertilizer. What's the difference between your product and why is it better than like, I'm going to go just buy some Miracle Grow and throw some Epsoma into it?
Great question. The reason that we formulated and engineered these soil products, typically, we really have, let me kind of take a step back. Right now, we're producing two different soil blends.
Okay.
Both blends are called living soil. Living soil is a term that's commonly used in the industry to describe a soil that is an organic soil system. So you don't have these inorganic inputs like chemical soluble fertilizers. And the reason, the main difference is that organic fertilizers and mixes support biology. The plants actually communicate and interact with the biology in order to get a vast majority of their nutrition, versus when you have an inorganic soil, you have a soil that has that is lacking in that biology because the inorganic fertilizers don't support the biology.
Interesting.
So your plants actually feed directly off of the inorganic soluble nutrients rather than the biology breaking down and converting the nutrients from the organic matter, the fertilizer, the minerals and the nutrients, and then interact with the plant, and the plant takes up the nutrition that way. So there's an enormous difference between the two to start off with. The product that we have, so it's a living soil. That's the first big part of it. The second big part of it is that it's mineral based versus soilless media. And I think that is going to be your biggest differentiator after you look at organic or inorganic. Then you're looking at mineral based versus soilless media.
What does that mean?
Yeah, a vast majority of the products in the industry are comprised of soilless media. Which the parts in soilless media are inert, typically inert, and most of the garden community is most familiar with these types of inputs: coconut coir,
Hmm.
peat moss,
Yep.
perlite.
Yep.
Those are all inerts. They're not going to add any type of nutritional benefit, and they're mostly there to take and fill up space.
Okay.
So when you look at the contents of a bag of, say, potting soil, it may have anywhere from 50%, maybe at a really, really low end, and probably up to about 95 or 99%, where a vast majority of those are probably between 80 and 95% of these fillers, these
Okay.
inert medias that are just basically filling up space.
Gotcha.
The other small percentage of what are in those mixes are your other fertilizers and things that'll actually add nutrition. So
Okay.
in our blends, we have the name is kind of long and it's complicated, but there's a huge backstory to it as
Hmm.
I'm trying to kind of going all over the place, but diving into
That's
it.
fine.
The soil product that we make is a organic living soil mineral based um, product.
Hmm.
The mineral based simply means that it's 100% natural, organic material, nutrients, and minerals. So in
Okay.
our blend, we have a base of compost, topsoil, nutrients, and minerals.
Okay. Interesting. So very different than your regular potting soil.
A huge difference. Yeah, it's a huge difference. I think like a good way to look at it is bulk density.
Okay.
So if you're looking at a potting soil that you're going to buy at a Lowe's or Home Depot, the bulk density of that is you're typically going to have a 1 cubic foot or a 2 cubic foot bag, and that's going to weigh typically a 1 cubic foot bag weighs 10 pounds and a two
Hmm.
cubic foot bag weighs 20 pounds. 1 cubic foot is 7.5 gallons. 2 cubic foot is 15 gallon. Our smallest bag that we have is only 6 gallons.
Okay.
And that's the largest bag we have, and that has to do with a weight limitation. Our 6 gallon bag compared to say a 7.5 gallon 1 cubic foot bag that weighs 10 pounds weighs 45 pounds.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're filling up, say, a 10 gallon pot, that 10 gallons of our soil blend would be 6/10, 70 or 80 pounds
Oh, wow.
of
You're not
weight of
moving that.
weight. Yeah, in 10 gallons versus if you're going to, have a potting soil that is mostly this inert material, it's going to have a significant less weight, and that's because most of it is just filler.
Okay.
And the industry, what my belief in just kind of getting into this in the last 2 years and actually getting into production and manufacturing is that it's just like many other products out there in the market where the big names out in the industry are trying to get a product out to the public that is going to be effective, but it's going to be in the cheapest way possible.
Hmm.
And kind of the lowest hanging fruit out there is putting a bunch of filler in there, putting enough chemical nutrients in there so the plants will be able to exist and be able to produce, but they're not optimizing the genetic expression of the plants because they it's not a natural system. It's a filler system that has some nutrition in it that allows you to get some type of expression, but I've kind of backed that into a different way of thinking. Financially, perhaps irresponsible because it's the cost is a lot higher.
Hmm.
It's a lot higher to ship it. You're going to get a lot less volume in the product if you have to fill up. Say you're filling up a 300-gallon garden bed.
Yeah.
It's
It,
it's 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 a much more expensive to do it if you're getting about 3 to 5 times less volume with our type of living soil product versus another product.
but with yours, it sounds almost like you could use less and go further. Almost. Obviously, there's nuance there with plant size and everything, but
Yes, yeah, and we still have a lot of testing to do, but that's what our testing is about. Our testing is about observation. Observation is a really, really important part of this whole system. It's not necessarily just about the science. It's not just about the chemistry. It's not just about the biology. It's about putting something in play, playing with many different variables, seeing what the results are, and then coming back with feedback from that scientific process and saying, what are the recommendations that we can recommend to add into a system? What are the different management styles? What are the different principles of managing and maintaining these systems to create what type of result? So, for instance, like I've got a lot of I like to use our pepper plants as a good example.
they were wild from what I remember last year.
We have, yeah, so I have some information on my Instagram where I'm putting this information out there, and I'm documenting the grow in our home property. But the average results for a standard pepper plant, that would typically be like a small mini type of pepper, like a
Mm-hmm.
snack pepper.
Yep.
We're getting between 300 to 600 peppers per plant in a season.
And if somebody just used like Miracle Grow or just stuck it in the ground and then maybe used a little bit of Miracle Grow potting soil and then maybe use Miracle Grow fertilizer, what would they expect from that pepper plant? Like 150?
Uh, 30, 40,
So
50
wait,
perhaps.
50 tops and you got 300 to 600?
Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah, that this kind of loops back into what kind of really got me thinking like I need to share this information because the soil health is starting off with the right inputs is very important. It's a critical
mhm.
part of it. But the management is actually I like to say it's 75% of your results will actually be management based, and 25% is going to be input based. So it's even more important to manage that properly and create this really healthy soil ecosystem that's going to support that type of result. Um, I can't say that it would be typical in any type of management just because you're using the same inputs
Right.
to get that type of result. So it's both of those combined. And but yes, those inputs, yeah, I think that that's not atypical. That I've seen that in a lot of other results that people are getting, all over the place. They're getting, I'd say maybe it's really spectacular, honestly, to see those results in person and say there's no way that that's possible.
I mean,
It's alarming, really. You're like that there's no way that that's possible. Like, how is it possible to get 600 peppers? I had a tomato plant last year. It was a sun gold, tomato.
those are delicious.
They're absolutely amazing. And I do a single stem method of
Okay.
growing our indeterminate tomatoes. And that single sun gold tomato produced 900 tomatoes
Holy shit.
in the season. Yeah, and it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I think like I did a count on it when it was maybe 5 or 6 feet tall, and there was 300 or 400 tomatoes just in the first five
What?
feet 5 feet of the plant. And I'm talking about strings. Like I've had strings of tomatoes that have been this long with 80 tomatoes on one single fruit set.
So for those listening, he has his hands maybe like 3 feet apart from the looks of it.
Yeah, maybe
two
two and a
two to
half,
three, but still like
2 to 3 feet.
my son gold last year was like maybe at the longest 12 inches, but probably more like 8 inches long for like the string of tomatoes. So you're saying like 2 feet? That's wild.
Hmm. It's absolutely amazing. This is a whole different topic, but what is interesting out there, like in the organic regenerative agriculture conversation, something I've always kind of, whenever this topic comes up, I think it's really fascinating. John Kempf, actually from Advancing Eco Ag, he's a big proponent of this, and he says that growers today, whether they're large scale industrial growers or backyard gardeners, we're really unfamiliar with the true genetic potential of plants.
Hmm.
And
I can see
I
that.
th I think that these types of results that we're able to achieve based off of the right inputs, based off of the right management, but in super small scale, it is very challenging to scale this because
Yes.
the inputs tend to be more expensive than would be scalable at like an industrial size, but at a backyard size, it's very, very manageable. We're starting to see, this type of potential for the plants to really express themselves in ways that we just are not familiar with, and it's really fascinating to see it firsthand, to be involved with it, to watch it evolve. It's
Th-
truly fascinating. It surprises me every single time it happens, and it's really neat.
So the next question, I already know what you're going to say from following you on Instagram, but probably the concern of someone who's been gardening is when you see very high production, taste goes down. That's one of the biggest benefits for growing your own, like especially tomatoes, like they don't taste like grocery store tomatoes. So how do your tomatoes, like that Sun Gold, which is one of my favorites, how does it taste when you're producing 900 tomatoes?
They taste absolutely phenomenal.
So
Um,
classic, if not better, Sun Gold flavor.
yes, I couldn't really actually speak to a comparison because
Okay.
I'm really only doing one system.
Okay.
I don't know what the flavor profiles are like in these other systems. Um, it could be that you do have a better, more vibrant taste in a system that's more stressed. That is
True.
sometimes, yeah, that's sometimes a stress typically causes this different type of expression, this different type of flavor profile, depending on how it is. But I will say that in these organic regenerative systems that we're using, the flavor profiles are absolutely stunning. They are unbelievable. The food tastes unlike anything that we've experienced anywhere. And we've gotten that same feedback from every single person that
Nice.
has tried our food. And it's really across the board too. Um, I think celery is something that comes to mind that was one of those foods that kind of just really shocked me. And
Hmm.
my reaction was it tastes more like celery. But what was interesting about it was it tasted more like celery than I've ever experienced
Interesting.
before. And I
Okay.
think a lot of food are like that as well. I wouldn't say a lot of food are exactly like celery. I think a lot of food actually seems to be much sweeter,
Hmm.
um, and just significantly more delicious.
Well, as you're talking, my thought for like the audience is when we're comparing, say, your normal go to the hardware store or the plant store and buy that kind of food. It almost sounds like for humans, that would be like supplements, like a multivitamin and protein powder and greens powder, versus your thing sounds more like what I kind of preach is like whole food nutrition. Like, yeah, like your NPK, which for the audience, that's your macronutrients for plants, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium, might be like percentage wise lower, maybe. I don't know your product, but your plants are actually absorbing it and using it versus more like, okay, here's like a multivitamin for your plants, but they're not really able to utilize it properly. It's kind
Yeah,
of what it sounds like. Obviously, humans and plants are different, but
yeah, it's a combination of a lot of different things. I believe that affect the flavor profile. I think most notably that I've seen in the flavor profile, so typically in organic produce, you are achieving a higher nutrient density.
mhm,
But I believe what the science is saying these days is that you're also able to achieve that in a similar nutrient density in inorganic systems as well.
yes.
So it's not necessarily that that's going to be a huge pro. I think that what is a huge difference in the flavor conversation is that you're getting that nutritional value not from these soluble nutrients like your NPK, like you just mentioned, but you're getting it through a biological process, which completely affects how the plant is expressing that flavor profile, and it also affects that that microbiome that is in that fruit that you're consuming, and how that interacts with your system, including your taste buds, including your own microbiome. But that's not present. Um, it's present to a certain amount, but it's not present in any significant comparison to an inorganic system.
Interesting. Okay. So with my garden last year, I was using a combination of organic and inorganic. So I would use some of like the soluble, like Miracle Grow stuff, but in combination with like the fish emulsion and some other bone meal and other things. And my garden did well. It did not doing as well as you said. But what you're saying, basically, I could do less plants, get more out of it. So, and then what
You
are
could
you
actually
seeing? Go
you
ahead.
could actually do more plants.
You could do more plants.
You can do more plants in a smaller space and get maybe 2 to 10 times the production. Now
Or
that's
or for the person with a time constraint, you could do say less plants, then it's the garden's less stressful. Say you're like starting out. You could do like one tomato plant and get the production of say five.
correct. Yeah, that's
So it
also
gives you
true.
more options. So you
Yeah,
could do more in a smaller space, which is
correct.
where I would go.
Yeah, so yeah,
My wife would hate it, but that's amazing.
yeah, so that influences, those are decisions that we make in our garden planning for our home garden every year, is how much food do we actually want to consume? How many plants is it going to take us to get there? And every year that evolves, and we are more familiar with what type of production we're going to get out of each plant. And it does influence, instead of needing 20 tomato plants, we really only need four instead of
Which is
20.
way easier to manage. Like
It's easier to manage, use less space, you have more options for growing other food, growing more diversity in that other space.
because my least favorite part is like the snipping and the tying up of tomatoes. Like I love tomato plants, but last year I think we grew 15 plants. And by the end of the season, it's just like I don't want to even think about it. Just like let them do their thing. And they kept producing. They're like on the ground trailing and still producing a ton. But to be able to do like say six, that would be so much more manageable and less time, less like supplies of like
Mm-hmm.
tying them up. I know you do the single stem leader. I was doing like
Mm-hmm.
the two,
Okay.
um, but it still ended up with a disaster because I let it get away from me.
Gotta stay on top of
You
it.
do, and then that's where I'm like thinking about like the audience and who's listening. Is some people will like have that time and commitment, and then others are going to be like, I just want to like try it out. I've been trying to like dip my toe in, but I don't want it to be like this crazy thing that takes up all my time. Like they might be traveling
Mm-hmm.
for vacations over the summer in the middle of growing season. So it can be like grow like a pepper plant, a tomato plant, a few like a zucchini, and then all you need is like that one, and that's going to produce a ton. That's awesome. And then less space.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found with, and this is more a selfish question because it was a huge issue for me last year, disease and pest resistance with your plants? Because I get annihilated with like squash bugs.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to be facing disease and pest pressure just the same as in inorganic system.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is in these types of organic regenerative systems that are focused on soil ecosystem health, is that our plants will have a better chance and opportunity at fending off that disease pressure, at fending off that or surviving, say, some type of fungus or something like that.
Okay.
But we're dealing with it just the same. And one of the things that I actually do mindfully every year is I do not use any type of insecticide or herbicide or
Nice.
pesticide to manage any of those pressures, because I want to get the feedback from the system
Hmm.
to see what is naturally in the system. And then what we're doing is managing those in more natural ways.
Okay. Because my pumpkin crop last year, I almost lost to a bunch of squash bugs, and we tried to do organic, but I had to get the seven dust out. Like it
Mm,
was so bad that I had like it was either lose the crop, and that was like in August. So I'm like, I can see it. It's right there. We're like a month away from starting to harvest.
hmm
So I didn't have a choice. It was either lose the crop or get pesticide out. And unfortunately, I had to do that. So I like hearing that. So what I do with pumpkins, and I actually picked this up for my parents, and it worked pretty well. Um, but your system might be probably better. So I take black cow and then a bag of like the most organic like garden soil you can find. So I mix those two together and then I'll add in like the Epsoma. I use like the tomato one, which is like a 18 18 21. Isn't no. That's the Miracle Grow. It's whatever the Epsoma tomato one. It's a lower, but it's a fertilizer. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I do mix all of that together and then like
hmm
bi-weekly I'll add fertilizer. But I saw your pumpkins from last year and
hmm
that they took over your front yard.
They did. They did. Yeah,
How
that was
did
shocking.
were more like decorative pumpkins, right though? Or were
Uh,
they
we had two different types of pumpkins. We had
okay?
a decorative small pumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
They were about this big, about a 4-inch diameter.
Nice.
I forget the exact name of those, although I do have my seeds right here. Um, and then we did a larger pumpkin, which was, I think, the jack-o'-lantern pumpkin.
Okay.
And I don't see my pumpkin. I'd have to find through them, but
That it's like the tiny little decorative ones you can find at most grocery stores. And then was
correct.
it like your classic like carving pumpkin or was it
Classic carving pumpkin
nice?
they got about, I'd say maybe 16 to 18 inches tall
Nice.
by maybe 12 to 14 inches in diameter. Um, and we had a ton of them, a ton of huge ones. I
And
think
how
we,
often were you like fertilizing, if at all?
so that is what's interesting about our system, is that it's so nutrient dense. And I think like an interesting point about how you just described all of the steps and different products that you
Yes.
needed to combine into, just fertilizing, say, one specific crop. Our soil blend has all of that in it. So it's a one-stop shop. And we didn't do any fertilizing at all through the entire season. Oh,
That would
yeah.
save me so much time.
Yeah, let that sink in. We didn't amend these at all.
Oh wow.
We filled up those beds, and then we overplanted them. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
another really interesting aspect of that. And it goes back to the point earlier where I was saying that we're actually growing, we have higher productivity at higher density with less inputs. In a 3 foot, so we have two different garden beds that we make from the Biosoil Company. We have a Resilience series and a Native series. The Resilience series are 8.5 inches tall. They all have a standard 3 foot diameter, and the Native series are 14.5 inches tall.
Okay.
The 3 foot diameter beds that we had, we put four vining plants in that 3 foot space.
Shit.
Yeah, so that's about perhaps say 12 inches from each of the other one, about 8 to 10 inches in from the side. And then
Which,
we had about four of those.
which I believe standard's supposed to be like 3 feet apart.
Typically it's about 3 foot and then five and then
Three to
three to four,
five.
3 to 5 foot on row spacing.
Yes.
Right. So we put four of those in a very little space in both the 8.5 inch bed and the 14.5 inch bed, 3 footers. And then we have two 6 footers in our yard that we did this with as well. And I think we did eight eight or nine plants in each of the 6 footers. So
Shit.
again, that was spaced about a foot apart. And yeah, you would typically expect to get either a very, very bad harvest or small size, small volume. And we got just the opposite. We
Oh, that's
have,
amazing.
yeah, we had I think we had about a dozen plus huge pumpkins. We had about 40 little pumpkins. We had, I think, somewhere around 20 or 30 large butternut squash. We had about a dozen cantaloupe. We
Oh,
had,
wow.
yep, we had a bunch of watermelon. We had about, I think, 6 to 8 watermelons.
From
Um,
one plant or two watermelon plants?
from several different watermelon plants, but all in
Okay.
the same space. So in that space in our on our property, we
Nice.
did 2 6 foot beds and 2 3 foot beds.
Okay.
So we had about, if we did four in each of the 3 foots, we had eight, and then we did about 16. So we had about 25 vining plants in 2 3 foots and 2 6 foots, and that took up about, I don't know, 40 by 40 or something. They just went absolutely
No,
wild, and
I remember seeing like, oh man, that took over.
it took over, and I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to be that successful. I didn't know what to expect, but that speaks to the nutrient density in the soil that we have, is that there's enough nutrients to support, without re-amending, that amount of plants for that amount of production. And that was in partial shade. That was
Huh.
not irrigated. I didn't irrigate that section at all. So there were things that were playing against that as well, that level of production, but we were still able to produce that with essentially a hands-off approach, which was part of what the experiment was about. It was it was using our garden bed product, uh, using a specific amount of our soil product, and planting it and forgetting about it almost. I did water
Which
it
is
on
awesome.
occasion. Yeah, and we were able to achieve really, really good results out of that at a very high planting density.
So I harvested about 300 pounds of pumpkins last year.
Wow.
Um, our watermelons didn't do anything. We didn't plant any cantaloupe, but well, I should say pumpkins and winter squash. So there was some
Hmm.
butternuts. So 300 pounds total. But what I was saying, what I told you earlier, I had to combine all that soil to make the
Hmm.
mounds, which I planted in ground. And then it was every 2 weeks I'm out there finding the pumpkin mounds in that giant mess
Yeah, yeah.
to fertilize or water,
Trying not
trying.
to step on the
Oh my
vines.
God. It was, and then the vines are prickly. So I'm like getting all scratched up.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was, obviously dealing with the pest. So it was a lot of work and a big time commit. And I love it because my favorite thing to grow is pumpkins, but being able to kind of just like let them go and let them be is also like, you, the time commitment, also the extra products because I'm fertilizing, I'm using fish emulsion and
Hmm.
Miracle Grow constantly. Like that seems so much better, just so much more convenient and easier.
Yeah, there's definitely a convenience factor to it, and I think even beyond that, there's a quality aspect to it. That's
Yeah.
organic. That's no chemicals. Now we did have pest pressure, or we had a fungus pressure. We had powdery mildew.
Okay. How'd they
So
fare with that?
it was, I would say, slow to start off, and then eventually it totally wiped out everything. But
Okay.
it wiped it out late enough in the season where we still were
That's going
able
to
to
be,
achieve all of that production. And I don't think that we were really limited much by it. But it was tough to start it, and we didn't treat it at all. So as soon as it started getting bad, it spread very, very quickly.
yeah.
And I think that there's some documentation of that on my Instagram, but um, yeah, we just wanted to see what happened, and I was again surprised by the result that we let that powdery mildew take over the entire space, and yet we were still able to yield and harvest 5 or 6 different types of crops that all came out to maturity.
Well, so basically, the powdery mildew only started to become an issue at the end of the plant's life, like the end of the growing season, really.
It was towards the end, but it wasn't all the way at the end. It was
Okay.
probably fending it off for at least a month and a half,
Okay. But
or
you didn't do
plus or
any
minus. No
anything.
mitigation. No
Interesting.
mitigation at all.
So
Yeah.
what was it? Like September-ish, it started take over.
I'm thinking it was maybe even in August.
Okay.
It started coming in pretty early. It could have been more than that month and a half. I really didn't keep track of that, but I do. I think it is documented somewhere along the line because I did a few different videos back there. But yeah, but all organically produced, and we didn't use any chemicals back there. And I think that that's a really important part of it too, is figuring out how to use those other ways to mitigate that in the future. And I
Right.
think part of the challenge that was in that specific scenario last year was just the pure density of planting that many 25 different vining crops
Yes.
in,
A
those
very
beds
small
are,
space.
yeah, they're only about 6 feet apart from each other. So
Yeah.
there was in about maybe 6 by 10 foot, we had 25 different vining crops. So there was a lot of competition for it
Yes.
to be on top of each other.
But if you went in and like started snipping the leaves off, like you could probably done like future for someone listening, you probably could really reduce how fast that powdery mildew spread right there
Hmm.
at the end of the season. Like you just go in, check the leaves, which is a disaster with that many 40-foot vines, but you can do
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Um, are there any like organic sprays, insecticides that you would recommend someone try if I always deal with powdery mildew and
Hmm.
some other things? Is there anything on the market that's organic that's not going to destroy your soil health, or is it kind of like just like try to do the best you can with your soil?
I think that there are products out there in the market. I am not familiar with those
Okay,
products because I just have not been experimenting with them. I've been looking at it from kind of how are we going to treat this in a holistic way? How are we going to treat this in
gotcha.
a soil health? From a soil health perspective, is the first thing that you want to have in place. You want to create the healthiest organic soil ecosystem, support that soil ecosystem to the best of your ability. That's going to, in turn, give the plants the highest immune system possible.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
that's your
Yep.
first defense system, is creating a really, really optimized soil ecosystem. The second and third part of those addressing these types of disease and pest pressure is going to be your management of plant spacing, defoliating,
Hmm.
allowing more airflow. That's going to reduce the amount of opportunity for those types of funguses to actually proliferate. And pest pressure is kind of a soil health conversation too, but it also goes to biodiversity. So
Okay.
that's putting in beneficial pollinators, creating those habitats for this ecosystem of beneficial insects that balance out the insects that are pressuring your plants, and the insects that are keeping those populations in control.
Okay.
And in the organic world, in that conversation of creating this biodiverse organic ecosystem for organic plant production, it can take several years to find a balance and to increase that insect biodiversity. So
Gotcha.
you can't expect that you put in a pollinator plant, you have a whole organic gardening system, and year one you're going to have a balance. It takes years for that to evolve and to attract all of that diverse insect population that may or may not already be existing in your system, and for it to then have the, say, uh, the pests that are actually pressuring your plants to be able to have a large enough population to keep that other population alive and thriving and year to year, and to
Okay.
create this balance in the system. So that balance in the system typically takes around 3 to 5 years to
Okay.
start building that balance in the system. Like, I think something that I've noticed this year from observation in our garden with insects is we have a really high population of praying mantis.
Oh,
which
interesting.
which is
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild. But I'll just be looking. I'll just be harvesting peppers, and they'll just be praying mantis all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, Peppers and celery, I noticed them in a lot this year.
Okay.
But
That is interesting.
it's just so there's these natural ways. I think that should always be kind of the core focus of addressing those types of pressures. And then there's also products that you can use to perhaps help supplement your problems, to perhaps help deter like a total loss, like you mentioned. Like, you don't want a total loss.
Right.
That's you worked for months to to get a result. So sometimes you do have to take other alternative
Yeah. That's
means.
for me, I view it last resort. It's like, oh, we have
Right.
to. So backtrack a little bit. Last year was our first year experimenting with putting in pollinators. So we did actually
Mm,
around the perimeter of our garden, we put in a native wildflower blend,
nice.
along with sunflowers and some other things mixed in. And definitely noticed everything that was flowering. We had increased harvest compared to my
Mm-hmm.
uncle-in-law's gardens are like 200 feet away, and they didn't get nearly as good of harvest because
Mm-hmm.
we had them all coming to ours,
Mm-hmm.
which was a issue in years past of like I would manually be like pollinating, which you can do, but this
Mm-hmm.
year didn't need to do that with the pumpkins, didn't need to do that with like unless I was in there, I saw it, I'm like, I know you're the Jaredell pumpkin, I'm gonna manually pollinate you because I'm here. So are there any pollinators that you would highly recommend people put into their garden? Obviously, it's going to vary depending on the region of the world that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
But here in Pennsylvania, are there any specific plants that you're like, always put this in, or most people should have this in their garden to help with pollinators or to help bring in beneficial insects to fight off pests?
So I'm not a huge expert in this
Okay.
category either. But I would agree with your point to say that you want to look at those native. I think really the focus comes down to when you're supporting pollinators, it's relevant to your area. And just because there may be specific plants out there that are highly recommended pollinator supportive plants, they may not be, say, native to your specific area. Those native plants that are specific to your garden, your space, they'll help create more sustainability in attracting pollinators over the long run than more non-native plants.
Nice.
Um, and the way that besides putting in a diversity, so that's probably there's a couple key factors. You always want to do diversity.
Mhm.
Diversity is number one. You don't want to focus on one specific plant. It's much better, instead of having five, you want to have 15. Even if you
Yes.
can only have one of 15, it makes more sense to have more diversity, and that'll attract a higher biodiversity of those insect pollinators and other supportive insects. But what I actually stem down to again is like, are these natural practices that can help support that same pollinator conversation besides something that you would be purposefully planting, say like an annual,
Mhm.
or have in your garden like a perennial, which is another great resource, is to not depend on annuals, but to depend on perennials that are going to come up year after year, and again create this system, this ecosystem that is going to draw these pollinators in on an annual basis. Now they know where the bee balm is, or they know where another type of pollinator is on an annual basis. They can come there and rely on it because those
Mhm.
systems need that consistency to really start to increase their numbers and to find your garden. And like you said, year after year, your productivity will increase every single year that you start putting those systems in place, because you're supporting a greater population of those diverse ecosystems. But the second thing I was going to say was your your native, um, uh, typically known as weeds,
Yep.
are actually I would say, the most valuable part of that pollinator conversation, because you took a part of your was it your yard, your lawn, and converted it into like a pollinator haven.
Yeah. Yep.
So whether you're taking that approach, which I think is the ideal way to approach it, or you're simply not creating such a monoculture in your lawn, so you're allowing weeds to be present in your lawn, like dandelions and clover, those types of native plants. So weeds is another big kind of interesting term in the
Yes, it
regenerative
is.
space, because weeds are simply the native plant species that are common to your area.
Yep.
And a lot of people, they've got this negative connotation in society, weeds, oh, I don't want them here. It's really just a preference of saying, hey, I'm not really aiming to have this dandelion in this space. And it's been kind of demonized and say, hey, this is a weed. Let's
Hmm.
get rid of it. Let's put a chemical to get rid of it. So I think a big part of this conversation too is not treating your lawns with any type of chemicals that's going to reduce the biodiversity in your lawn and diverse the native populations of those diverse plant species that are attracting and supporting the pollinators. So like in our yard, I'll mow later in the season
Hmm.
so that all of those flowers can support the early pollinators that need
Yep.
food coming out of winter. And I'll leave a lot of those dandelions and so forth to, again, their food.
Yeah.
And they're also
Bees love them.
increasing the health of the lawn as well, because it's creating this biodiverse space, it's still in a controlled way, but it's attracting those pollinators in that way.
So for the audience, and this is the way I understand kind of like dandelions, clovers, and grasses working together. Like you have grasses, which you kind of cut and they kind of create like add like the organic material back to the soil. You
Mm-hmm.
have clovers, which are a legume and they fixate nitrogen, which
Mm-hmm.
help feed the grass, which need a lot of nitrogen. And then the dandelions have this long taproot, which can help
Mm-hmm.
bring up minerals, but also when it's middle of summer, the taproot shrinks, creating the space so rain can actually penetrate the soil.
Mm.
So when you have dandelions, it's automatically aerating your soil, so you don't have this like hard solid surface
Mm-hmm.
that rain can't penetrate and you get all that runoff. So it's like when you have all three combined, your
Mm-hmm.
grasses thrive so much better than if you
Mm-hmm.
just like kill everything. And we deal with that with the HOA here. Like, please don't kill all the dandelions and clovers. Like, you guys don't need to spray all this stuff. Just leave them and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be better. And when they do leave it, everything works so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like our grass is typically greener for longer in periods of less precipitation in the high heat of the summer,
Yeah.
because we have that more of a diverse system.
Yeah.
So it'll be amazing. Like I'll look out of my window and my neighbor's lawn is starting to die and our lawn is still doing okay.
And you're not watering it or throwing on like
Right.
every I see on those like every the Sunday whatever, it's like fertilize your lawn every Sunday. I'm like, that sounds awful to me. Like I want to
Yeah.
like kind of leave it,
Yeah.
let it do its thing.
Yep. Yep.
um on the same note, also like doing the clover lawns also not the greatest idea because it's a mono crop type
Yep.
situation.
Monoculture. Mm-hmm.
Adding
Right.
clover, like if you have a lawn and you want, like, you can add clover, you don't need to add dandelions, they'll come up.
Yeah.
They'll get in there. But you can always just buy clover seed and add that. I actually plant a lot of clover for our
Mm.
food plots, so
Mm-hmm.
there's quite a few varieties out there.
Yeah, it's a huge attractor for deer. I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the best, but it's perennial, and I'm like, I kind of want to like get set up, leave it. So our combination for the food plots, clover and chicory. So like
Okay.
deep tap root, nitrogen fixer, and then I'll throw in some grasses. So kind of like the same situation as the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
It's just letting that clover get much, much higher than you would ever let your lawns for food production for deer.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Neat.
So for someone, so one more question. I know we're at the hour mark. So someone who is just starting out gardening, what would be, say, a few plants you would recommend somebody who's new, or maybe it's like their second year gardening? First year was like maybe some success, but they struggled a little bit. What would be a couple plants you would suggest them try out with your soil?
Mm, good question. My recommendation for new gardeners is to start with something that you're already eating.
That's great.
That's my number one suggestion, and that's really comes down to it's something that lessons that I've learned and that my family's learned over the last eight seasons of growing food is that you can grow something, but if you don't know what to do with it, if you don't know how to use it, if you're not going to eat it, you're kind of wasting your space, the time, the experience. So if you start off with what you're already buying from the store, what you already got stocked in your fridge year round, that's typically where I would start.
That's
Now,
awesome.
our soil specifically, it'll grow just about anything very, very easily. We call it a water only plant and plug system. You put your plant in there, you keep it watered. That's pretty much it. You do have a re-amending that we do recommend in late spring, early summer
Okay.
with our second product called Grow. No, our first one's called Grow, and then our second one's called Feed, and that's just like a re-amending of additional nutrients.
But that's a,
But
you do that once a year.
yeah, it's a two-step process. So you start off with Grow. That's going to be like a nitrogen-based soil, and then
Okay.
Feed is more of a phosphorus and potassium-based that
Okay.
feeds your fruit, flower, and seed production.
Okay.
So our it's a two-step process. Grow supports early development of leaf stem and root, and then Feed supports your mid and late stage production of fruit, flower, and seed.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
really simple two-step process, and you don't even need to do that. So it's just if you want really, really high production, I would recommend re-amending
Okay.
because your
Yep.
plants are going through that. But there is such high nutrient density in our grow product that if you're using, especially if you're using it to create your soil system, like we had the results from that whole vining area, we didn't re-amend that at all.
Oh wow.
I didn't even have that. I didn't even have that second feed product produced yet. Um, so we just used the grow product once, and that fed for. I think it should feed for about 2 to 3 months of heavy production.
Okay. So if
That
someone
grow
did like
product.
raised beds, they could, year one, you put in the grow, and then you're
Mhm.
saying either late season or the next season, you would then put in the feed. Is that kind of
I'll
what you're saying, or is it a little
Yeah,
different?
I'll summarize. So this can all be found on our website too. In
Yep.
each product, it has a whole summary of how to use each product.
Nice.
The grow. So we have grow, which is what you use to start off with, and then feed is what you use to amend. So if you're just going to use one, you can use grow. That'll feed for probably 2 to 4 months, depending on what type of production you have, what type of system you're in. Um, and if you want to re-amend, you're going to use grow,
Okay.
feed. You're going to use feed if you want to re-amend. And that will typically happen about at month 2 to 3 after
Okay.
you have your plants in the ground. The way that you would start your systems is the best case scenario for starting a garden system is you actually want to prepare your soil in the late fall,
Mm. Hmm.
October, November. And the reason behind this, especially in organic systems, is that you want it to mature, is typically the term used, but you want that system to basically start breaking down for the biology to start integrating into that system, and for those nutrients to start becoming more bioavailable for the plants as you plant into them in early spring.
Okay.
Now, if you're not going to have the time to say to amend in the late fall, you want to typically amend at least 1 month before you start planting.
Which is
And
probably going to
it's
be a little bit more what people listening to this will be doing.
exactly, this is a good time to do it. So March is a really, really good time. I'd say this is the latest month that you want to really have put your best foot forward for starting your garden systems. And that is the same conversation, is that you're allowing that system to start maturing, to start becoming bioavailable, so that as you plant your plants into those systems, they'll start having that nutrition ready for them as soon as they to hit the ground running, basically. And then if you're going to use that feed product, you would only use it in, like, say, late May or early
Okay.
June, depending on what you're growing or depending on what you're planting. So it typically is just going to lag 2 to 3 months. So your grow nitrogen-based product will feed for those first 2 or 3 months. It's going to get a lot of that leafy growth going for your plant. And then when you're really looking for production, you can supplement with another amendment. And then I typically, again, have the same recommendation. You want to start that 1 month before you're expecting to see high production. And that
Gotcha.
allows those products to mature, to become available, so that when your plants are starting to pull up all that additional nutritional need, they'll have all those nutrients ready for them.
Gotcha. That makes more sense. That's awesome. I like that. That's super simple. You're
Yeah, it's
not,
a really simple process. I'll try to make it as simple
yeah.
as possible for the consumer. You can buy one product, you can buy two products. You're just using them once a year or twice a year. Once and twice.
There's a few creators I follow, and they're like, here's my soil like fertilizing thing. Is like every week or every 2 weeks, it's like, here's like your fish emulsion and organic, your inorganic, and then it's like, and then you take granulated stuff and it's like put it around the base. It's like one that's a ton of time, and you're trying to like manage all the different pieces. And like I trap, like our garden's not here at our townhome. I have to go to my wife's mom's property where our garden's
Mm-hmm.
located. So I have to take everything with me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also cost wise, like you're buying 3, 4, potentially 5 products and then try and
Mm-hmm.
combine all of them. Stuff is running out at like middle of the season, other
Yeah.
things full. So your
Yep.
product is like, here, just like one and done, easy.
It's
Like,
yeah, it's once and done, and we have everything that you need in there. We have so we have the organic matter. So the organic matter, the compost, is a really, really critical part of it.
mhm.
And then we also have the nutrients, and we also have the minerals in there, and it's everything you need in one package. It's water only. It's plant and plug. It's ready to
that
go. And
that's
it.
amazing. That
Thank you.
that's awesome.
You'll have to try it this year.
I I'm planning on it. With the feed and the grow, if someone's doing pots, um, is that something where like you need to replace the soil every single year? Is that something you can kind of reuse that soil? Have you not experimented with that yet? Is that like a future experiment you're gonna run?
So we did our first version of that, our first second year trial of that last year.
Okay.
It wasn't with our optimized blends that we have right now. It was with, like, kind of we just basically were adding biochar and vermicast and our base compost topsoil blend into these. I think it was about 20 15-gallon pots that we did 3 years ago. So last year was the second year of those, and we had tremendous results from just top dressing.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, my expectations. We do have a bunch of trials this year. I've got maybe about 16 different pots that will be our second year of those grow and feed products that we have now available to do a second year trials with. But it's just a top dress. So
Okay.
these soil systems, they should be good for, I think, between maybe 5 and 10 years
Wow.
to kind of reuse, because what we're creating in these soil ecosystems with this product is we're creating this substrate that only gets better with time. Every year,
Because of the biology, it breaks down.
it's a combination of the biology, the aggregation, the micro and macro pores, the aggregates, the exudates, all of these different things that are a product of plants actually being in the soil ecosystem.
Okay.
So similar to how you were saying, dandelions have a taproot that creates a place for water to, follow that type of cavity and penetrate the soil system.
Mhm.
When you're using a no-till management style, which is when you don't disturb that
Right.
soil system at all, you're getting structure that ends up getting built into that soil ecosystem
Okay.
that takes years to develop.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
it's similar to, like, if you're looking, like, let's say you're looking at the construction of a skyscraper,
Hmm.
and it's a 100-story skyscraper, and when they first put it up, you just have all those um, big beams in them,
Yes. Yep.
right? Um, if you have a compacted soil system, like say it's solid clay, it'd
Yep.
be like if that entire soil system was filled with concrete.
Okay.
That
Gotcha.
entire
Yep.
skyscraper filled with concrete, and
Yep.
there's no way to penetrate it. Um, as that system matures, it looks more like that, just the steel beam infrastructure of that skyscraper, where you have
Gotcha.
all these cavities in there. And as that system starts maturing into like years 3, 4, 5, and onward, it actually looks more like that whole skyscraper built out. And now you have rooms and cavities and drawers and pencils and all of those little micro pores and small little spaces that all different types of biodiversity can exist in, all of those variations of space and water penetration and air penetration, that creates a living, breathing system that gets better with every year. So the soil that we produce creates an excellent foundation, and then that foundation continues to get better and better with time, as
That's
long as you
awesome.
manage it in specific ways. And that's simply being re-amended with a top dress.
That's awesome.
And you can also do things like cover cropping, which is just a different management technique, but would just be top dressing with 1 to 2 inches of that same blend, and that'll add those nutrients and organic matter that'll refresh that system every year. And then the infrastructure of that system will mature and get better every year to create higher and higher productivity.
That's awesome.
It's
That's
it's
really
pretty
cool.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool
really
how
neat.
you've built this. I know we are kind of out of time here. So Ryan, where can people find you?
So thebiosoilcompany.com is our website.
Okay.
I also have Instagram, which is, I think it's at the Biosoil Company, which can be found through the website. And if you want to shoot me an email, happy to answer any emails. Email is Ryan, Ryan, at thebiosoilcompany.com. And we also do consulting work. So I do garden design, I do consulting on growing, gardening questions, that line of work too. So everything from your backyard garden, very small scale, up to larger scale with multiple integrations of these regenerative systems like vermicast systems and composting systems and black soldier fly and water, and how to integrate it all into this more regenerative approach for sustainable agriculture.
Awesome. Well, guys, go down to the show notes if you're interested. Get the soil, or just give Ryan a follow on Instagram. So that's all going to be down in the show notes down below. Ryan, thank you for coming on. Definitely have to do this again.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the second one.
Perfect. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, guys. Like I said earlier, please leave a review, especially for this episode. If this is something you like, you want to see more people like Ryan on this podcast, please, please, please let me know. Even if it's not a review on social media, go to one of my Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, send me a message. Let me know that you like this episode or other episodes. Even if you're like, please stick with the other stuff, let me know. Obviously, like, I like to bring people on I want to talk to, but ultimately I could do that on my free time. This podcast is for you, the listener. Also, make sure to go give Ryan a follow, especially if you're into gardening. Even if you're not going to buy his product, stay up to date with what he's doing, as I'm going to be helping him with a little bit of social media stuff. He likes to educate and teach. So pay attention to his social media and other stuff, as he's going to be putting out educational content that You should just follow, listen to him, see how he's doing things so you can take that and apply it to your thing if you're not going to grab his soil, which is fine, especially if you're like on the West Coast or in another country. Like, it's not going to be realistic to grab his stuff, but you can learn from him and try to maximize your own garden. And finally, he also has some projects in the work that we talked about off camera. Just pay attention if you're into the gardening. He has some interesting things coming out. He owns a CBD company, so I'll say it's related to that, of stuff that will be coming out in the future that he's doing with his soil and his companies that sound pretty awesome. As long as everything falls into line, it's going to be a pretty awesome thing to see.